All right, so this is from your instruction book, page 80 and 81. Every instruction book, we're looking at using an equation to find the slope and y-intercept. So we're going to read the problem below, and then we're going to explore different ways to find the slope and the y-intercept for a linear function when the equation is given to us. So here we go. Here's our plan. It says the telephone plan charges a regular monthly amount plus charges for the number of minutes of use x as shown in the equation. The equation is right here, so I'm going to highlight some of the things that go along with that. You see the equation. Got y equals 1/10 x plus 40. I want to know what's the slope and what's the y-intercept of this function. It says you can model it. You could use a table to find the slope and the y-intercept of the function. So when we go through this, the y-intercept, if you recall, it's always when x equals 0 right there. So when x equals 0, you can see that your y-intercept is going to be 40. And then we look for the slope. Well, that's the change in y values. So you see these are all going up by 10 each time. And then the x values are going up by 100. So it's 10 over 100 or 1/10, which is 0.1. So in our equation, if we go back to that, if you look at the equation right there, where these things occur, the 1/10 was right there, and the 40 was right there. And if you remember correctly, the y-intercept was the 40, and the slope was that change in y. So these all of these down here on the y values, they were all going up by 10, and the x values were all going up by 100. So it's a change in y divided by a change in x. 10 divided by 100 is 0.1 or 1/10. All right, so when we graph this, it says you can graph the ordered pairs from the table to show the slope and the y-intercept of this to go along as well. So again, the y-intercept, it shows up on the graph right here. There's your 40 again, and then each one of these, they're going up 10 and over 100, up 10 over 100, up 10 over 100. So there is your rate of change, your 1/10. It's going up $1 for every 10 minutes that go along with that, 1 for every 10. Okay, and then they also show you this formula that goes along with it. So they got the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if you plug those numbers in, if we were to do that, if we were to look at the change in y over the change in x to go along with this, we would go with our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You do that right there, x2, oh my, I cannot make an x1 there, x2 minus x1, you get the idea? So if we plug those numbers in, if we plug numbers in for that, what we're going to end up doing is you're going to take the y2 value, which is 50, minus 40. So 50 minus 40 is going to be, if we go 50 minus 40, that's going to be 10 over x2 minus x1, 100 minus 0. So 10 over 100 is once again going to be 1/10 when we reduce that. All right, let's take a look at the next page here. So we'll go on to the next one, our next part of this, and we'll load it up right here. So we turned our page, we're at 83 right now. It says now you can examine the equation, the table, the graph, and to find the slope and the y-intercept. You know that the y-intercept point always has an x-coordinate of 0. So what number can you substitute for x in the equation to find the y-intercept and show how you do this? Well, what you can do is you can just throw 0 in there. So we're going to see what happens when x equals 0. So what you're going to do is you're going to say y equals, if you remember the equation, it was 0.1 x, but instead of x, we're going to put 0 in there, plus, I believe it was 40. If we go back to that, was it 40? I don't even remember. Let's take a look again. My memory's not very good, but you can see right there that it was 40 right there. There's our 40. So we'll go back to our, I just flipped back a page there to take a look. So we'll look at this page. So plus 40. And we plug that number in. If I can get this to go. So plus 40. And basically when you take a look at this, I mean, if you take 0.1 times 0, 1/10 times 0, that's 0, plus 40 is going to be 40. So there's going to be your y-intercept that goes along with that. The y-intercept will be 40. Verify that your answer in problem 9 is correct by describing how the table or graph shows the y-intercept. So if we go back to that once again, the table or the graph. Now this is what you are going to explain. And we've already explained it right here, but I'm going to re-explain it again. In the table, it's when x equals 0. So it's this value right here. You can see it. We've already highlighted it. I'm going to re-highlight it again. When x equals 0, there it is in the table. That's your y-intercept. Or if you're looking at it on the graph, let's go to the graph right here. It's that circled point right there. See where I circled that at 40? I'll even circle it again. So the same thing right there. Okay, that point right there, it's when x equals 0, y is 40. So that's how you can represent that. And then I'll let you explain that on your paper, how you figure that out. Let's look at 11 now. Explain how to find the slope using a table or graph. So again, we've already done that. We did that on the previous page. I'm still going to go back to it and I'm going to show you again. So on this right here, we found the slope. And if you recall what it was on the table right here, it's these change in y values. So each of these were going up by 10 each time. That was the plus 10 I wrote on the end. These were going up by 100. If you take 10 and divide it by 100, you get 0.1 or 1/10. That's that on there. If we look at it on the graph, once again, putting this in a different color this time just so you can see me write it on there, but it's going up 10 over 1. Up 10, not over 1, but up 1 over 10. Up 1 over 10. So it's going up 10 over 100. Each one of these, once again, up 10 over 100, up 10 over 100, 10 over 100, 10 over 100. If you take 10 and divide it by 100, you get that 0.1, the 1/10 that goes along with that. So there you go. That's how you find the slope. And then it says explain how the equation 0.1, 1/10, y equals 1/10 x plus 40 shows the slope and the y-intercept. And what I want you to notice on this is that the slope, okay, the slope is the number that's out in front of x, and the y-intercept is the number on the end. That's all by itself. It's the m and the b when it's in y equals mx plus b form. The m is the number that's multiplied by x right there. So this number, this 1/10, and the b is that part right there. So m represents slope, and b represents the y-intercept. Now on 13, they say, what do the slope and y-intercept mean in the context of the problem? Well, the y-intercept is, if we go back to the problem right here, let's go back to that problem, what the original problem was up here. It says they charge the telephone plan charges a regular monthly amount, plus charges a number of minutes of use, x, as shown in the equation. So when we go through and when we do this, I'm going to highlight some things for you once again. So if we are talking about the y-intercept, okay, that is the regular monthly amount. Okay, the regular monthly amount was at $40 right there. Okay, the 40, which I just covered up. That's the y-intercept. The slope is the charge and charges for the number of minutes. So the slope is the number of minutes. Okay, so it ends up being the cost per minute. So your slope is related to that. It's related to the number of minutes, the number of calls you make, and the number of minutes that go along with that. All right, the last one right here, actually not the last one, but it says describe 2 different ways to find a slope of a function and 2 different ways to find the y-intercept of a function. Well, what I want you to recall, what we talked about before, and if you need to rewind this and go back and look, you can do that as well too. But recall how we did it in the table, how do we do it in the graph, and how do we do it in the equation. So I've shown you 3 ways, you just have to explain 2 of those. So there's a way that the slope and the y-intercept are represented in a table, there's a way that they're represented in a graph, and there's a way that they're represented in the equation. Okay, so take a look back at those, you can see how you can explain that. The last one right here, it says try it. Use what you just learned about slope and y-intercept to solve this problem and show your work on a separate sheet of paper. So it says a different telephone plan includes a monthly payment of $50 plus a 5/100ths, so a 5 cent per minute calls. And I want you to write an equation for this function and identify the slope and the y-intercept. So what I want you to have on this one, what you should have if you put it in y equals mx plus b form, it should be y equals 0.05 x plus 50. Okay, so that should be your answer. And when you're explaining why, well, this part right here, the 50, That's your initial charge. That's your starting amount, your initial value, okay? The monthly payment. That's that 50 on the end. That's the B value, okay? This run right here, the 0.05 per minute. That's the rate. When you see per, think rate. All right, so there you go. There's some problems for you, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.